Good morning. Take a deep breath. It's been a week to end all weeks. So I'd invite you just for a moment before I begin speaking or offering a reading, if we just kind of close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let it go slowly. And in your mind's eye, if you could just settle your energies down into your heart center. There is that center within each one of us that is totally, irrevocably at peace. So I invite you just for a moment to settle into that place. It's there. To find that place of quiet, that place that knows that grace fills the universe. I needed that more for me than for you. For the reading this morning, I want to just read, it's a brief excerpt from a book called The Aquarian Conspiracy. If some of you are my age, you've probably read it a long, long time ago. Marilyn Ferguson produced the book. It was a collection of writings. And the basic thrust of the book was that it was observing that all evolution involves true transformation. Evolution involves the reforming of basic structures, not merely adding on to what has been, to what already exists. So this story comes from that book. It was an account that is this microphone okay? Are you, okay. She wrote about Robert Artry, who was an anthropologist. And she wrote about him, describing an incident in Kenya when he was in a conversation with Louis Leakey, who was also an anthropologist. And Leakey pointed out to Artry a stick on which what appeared to be a coral-colored flower made up of many small blossoms like a hyacinth. And on closer inspection, each oblong blossom turned out to be the wing of an insect. These insects, said Leakey, were flatted bugs. Artry was startled as he looked at the blossom that was made up of the bugs, and he observed that this surely was a striking instance of protective imitation in nature. And Leakey was amused, and he explained that the coral flower that was imitated by the flatted bugs does not exist in nature. So Artry noted this in his book. There are moments when one's only response to evolutionary achievement can be a prickling sensation on the scalp. But my speechlessness had not yet reached its most vacant, brain-numbed moment. Leakey shook the stick. The startled colony rose from its twig and filled the air with flatted bugs. Then they returned to their stick. They alighted in no particular order, and for an instant the twig was alive with all these little creatures climbing over each other's shoulders in what seemed to be a random movement. But the movement was not random, and shortly the twig was still, and once again I beheld the coral flower. I was really intrigued by this story when I first read it, way back in the 1980s when the book came out, and realizing that at that time we were in the midst of a decade of turmoil. Ronald Reagan had become president, bringing in tax cuts, reduction in government spending, deregulation. There was unrest in Poland in the Solidarity movement that brought about free elections for the people of Poland. That movement, in turn, triggered eventual collapse of other various communistic regimes in Eastern Europe, The Berlin Wall came down. The influence of the Iran-Iraq War was felt throughout the Middle East and around the world. The Tiananmen Square massacre happened. It was a time of turmoil. Long-standing and seemingly entrenched societal and political structures fractured. They came apart, and they reorganized over time. That process of coming apart and reorganizing again and again continues on now well into the 21st century. The chemical name for this process of breaking up, of scattering, of spreading, the chemical name for that is dissipation. The word itself almost sounds like the process it describes, dissipation. In 1977, Ilya Prigogine was a Belgian physical chemist. He won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for his theory of dissipative structures. That theory offers a scientific model for transformation at every level, and it explains the critical role of stress in transformation. It seems that we grow or evolve in direct proportion to the amount of chaos that we can withstand and sustain and dissipate. Thinking about our current situation has me wondering if the theory of dissipative, it's a mouthful, a theory of dissipative structures might be a hopeful metaphor in the midst of the chaos and the confusion. So I'm thinking maybe we'll just think together about it for a few minutes, and then you can decide whether it's a helpful metaphor or not. Following Prigogine's lead, we might understand that in all of creation, there are open systems and there are closed systems. A closed system might be a cold cup of coffee, or a rock, or a log. And in closed systems, there's no internal transformation of energy. There's no exchange with the environment. A cup of cold coffee is a cup of cold coffee. And unless someone decides to act on it and heat it up, it stays a cold cup of coffee. There's no interaction with the environment. Open systems, on the other hand, are involved with a continuous exchange of energy with the environment. We might think about our island life as an open system. With summer coming, we might think about the way in which we receive the energy of summer visitors into the structure of island life, and how that energy in the form of commerce gets transformed into income that supports the lives of so many who live here year-round. But that influx of energy also changes us. The summer influx has the power to destabilize us. We may experience it sometimes as chaotic. And yet, somehow, our island community internalizes all that energy. We feel the disruption, but we often learn from it how we can, and we do, reorganize. We learn from it, and we evolve into different and new ways of coping. We restructure as a result of the influx of energy. I noticed new signage around. Those little turquoise signs on the bicycle paths that help bicyclists know where to go. They didn't exist here a few years ago. We developed new traffic patterns. Union Street is now a one-way street. A rotary appeared at the intersection of the Barnes Road and Edgartown Road. A new hospital years ago took form in response to the increased demand of our increasing population. There is nothing comfortable about being a dissipative structure, an open system. It means being in constant flux. It means living in a continual state of uncertainty. Dissipative structures, open systems are inherently unstable, constantly reorganizing, constantly reordering in response to what chemistry calls perturbations or disturbances. COVID was a massive perturbation. An energy from outside of our normal order entered into the life of the planet, disturbing and disrupting the order of things, causing a massive restructuring and reorganizing of life on the planet. And out of that came a reordering that we experienced such that we now call it before COVID and since COVID. Communities and states and nations somewhat clumsily organized various social protections. We learned how to stand 6 feet apart from each other. We learned how to use Zoom. The glaring inequities of our healthcare system became painfully visible. Brand new vaccines rapidly came into being as science mobilized to meet the demand. In the midst of the disturbance, transformation was already happening. And we probably aren't even fully aware yet of all the transformation and increased complexity that has come about because of COVID. So maybe you can see where this is going. This nation is an open system. Massive energies are constantly in flux, and we are in a state of perturbation, a state of disturbance, of unprecedented, and that word is almost so overused these days, but we are in a disturbance of unprecedented proportions. Like the flatted bug flower, the stick that represents stability has been and is being shaken. The myriad components that have long constituted the way things are being shaken and dislodged. Like those disturbed insects, everything seems up in the air. The stress affects us in so many parts of our lives, as individuals, as a community, and most certainly as a nation. Now, some of these massive disturbances are not immediate short-term occurrences. Witness the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Other disturbances hit quickly. Israel and Iran exchange missile fire. Societal systems reverberate with the disorganization that follows as a result. We cannot yet see how all the scatteredness will reorganize. And so we need a word of grace in the midst of the turmoil and the scatteredness. And I wondered if Ilya Prigogine's theory of dissipative structures might offer us that little grace note in the midst of this most disruptive and dissipative time. Might it help us to consciously understand that what we are enduring may be part of an evolutionary process, not unlike the forces of an erupting volcano that creates new land in the Pacific Islands. Might a chemical theory be a metaphor that helps us gain perspective on the vast perturbations in the system? Does the theory of dissipative structures offer any hope in the midst of the violence of the eruption caused when something new may be coming into being? We've talked recently here before about the prophetic imagination, that function of the mind to be able to envision a larger picture beyond the immediacy of the world that we know it as we know it. That notion of the prophetic imagination has been around for centuries. Back in the mid-6th century, before the Common Era, around 2,500 years ago, ancient Israel was in the midst of a massive perturbation. The northern part of the country had been invaded by Assyria. Massive deportations happened. Assyria had assumed control. The Israelite people were in exile in a strange land. into the midst of that devastation came the very politically incorrect and dangerous imagination of the prophet Isaiah. He spoke poetic words of reordering, words of hope and grace to a devastated people. In a poet's language, he spoke first with words of assurance and then with words of challenge toward a more expansive vision. Listen to these words from the 43rd chapter. First, the words of hope. But now, thus says the one who created you, O Jacob, the one who formed you, O Israel. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Through the rivers, they will not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you will not be burned, and the flame will not consume you. And then the words of challenge. Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. The mind of the prophet was connected with the larger vision, the big picture. We're not yet hearing that prophetic voice in our own time. So maybe we need to hear the ancient words to give us a firmer ground to stand on. In theological and metaphorical language, the prophet was alluding to what science tells us about today, that in the midst of the disturbance, there is grace, there is hope, that we may indeed be in the excruciating labor pains that precede a new creation. The prophet challenged a people under terrible stress to let go of yearning for the way things were, to relinquish their desire to return to the good old days. He challenged them to be on the alert for the ways in which life might be in the process of transformation. And he offered the prophetic vision that there would indeed be a way through. We're in the thick of it. And I will leave it to you to decide whether or not the metaphors from science and sacred text are useful. Are they hopeful? Are they hopeful for us as we move through the massive perturbation and disruption? Are they graceful? Are they graceful as we move through these many dangers, toils, and snares? Are they graceful as we move through and endure this time together? Our closing hymn should wrap this up. We'll use the second two verses of Amazing Grace. And if you can substitute the pronoun we for the pronoun I where it appears.